Question. Kim, you don't say how the dark forces attack us. Is it through fear, by creating fearful dreams, or other means? Please clarify. Well, this is a very broad topic, because there are many ways in which lower forces attack us. So let's first clarify. Everything is created out of what I call the one mind, or the Christ mind, or the Buddha nature. And this was done specifically because the Creator knew it was going to give free will to all of the extensions of itself. I explained this in my video about how the world was created. And so in order to make sure that you have free will and you can do anything you want with that free will, but you can never be lost in your choices, everything is created out of one mind, which means no matter how far you go into this illusion that you are a separate being, you can still get back by contacting the one mind in yourself. So, what the dark forces, what I wanted to say was, so there are beings, human beings and other beings, who see themselves as connected to the one mind. They have an awareness of the one mind, and they realize they are out of the one mind. Then there are beings who have gone into what I call the illusion of separation, where you see yourself as a separate being. And these beings have done this basically by denying the one mind in themselves. So this is what we could call, in a broad sense, dark forces. Now, some of them are human beings in embodiment who are narcissists, who are egotists, who are manipulating other people. Like you see some dictators, but also other people that seem like normal people can be in this state of manipulating others. But there are also some forces, that's also explained in my talk about how the world is created, that are not in physical embodiment. So they exist in what I explained. There are 4 levels of the material world. There's the emotional, mental, and identity realms. And some of these forces are what I call fallen beings because they have rebelled against the purpose of growth. So they are actually seeking to, they're in a sense seeking to raise up the separate self to some ultimate status, almost like a godlike status, or make it immortal. And what happens is that when you go into separation, when you don't see yourself as a connected being, you receive only a very small amount of energy from your higher self and from the spiritual realm. Just enough to keep you conscious and functioning. And that means that if you want to do anything in a state of separation, you have to take energy from others. And so that's the essence of all dark forces, what we can call dark forces. They need to take energy from those who are still receiving it from the spiritual realm, from the higher selves. And so basically you could say that everything they try to do to manipulate or fool people is centered around getting energy from people. And you get energy in various ways. They get energy from just over people's attention, if you put their attention on them. But they also get energy if they can scare you into fearing them. So that's why it's a sort of a delicate topic to talk about. And many people I met who are spiritual people, they don't want to talk about dark forces. They don't want to hear about it. It's all good, they say. But it isn't all good, because, and you can just look at the world and say, is it all good? What's happening in the world? You know, why are people doing these things they're doing? Well, they are doing harmful things to others because their minds are taken over by these dark forces. And when you harm somebody, you steal energy from them. Torture, for example, is an extreme way to steal people's energy, their psychic energy, emotional, mental, and identity level energy. So if you're living on a planet like Earth, you know, you have to be aware, if you really want maximum spiritual growth, you have to be aware of dark forces. You have to take precautions about it. So how do dark forces attack us? Well, there are various ways. I can't cover all of them, but we can say that there are certain categories. There can, a dark force, if you're talking about a dark force, you're not really talking about a physical person. You're talking about beings in these emotional, mental, and identity realms. But they can use a physical person to attack us physically. And that is what happens, as I said, torture, for example. So you have these people. I mean, I remember as a child learning about torture, just the whole idea that there's something called torture, and I couldn't fathom how people can do this to others. I just couldn't fathom it. I, for that matter, still really can't, but I understand intellectually that these people are not thinking. They are not self-aware. Their minds have been taken over by these dark forces, and that's why they can do this to another person. So this is one way, and there are of course other physical attacks: violence, crime, stealing your property, stealing your identity, harassing you in various ways. You know, this, I mean, even to the point where somebody who's bullying you, whether it's a child bullying another child, or an adult bullying you in the workplace, or sexually harassing you at the workplace. These are also ways that the dark forces are using other people to attack you. But then there is the question of fear. You know, is it true fear? Well, it's not just by creating, as the question says, creating fearful dreams. It's fear in general, inducing fear. When people go into fear, you give energy to the dark forces who are projecting this fear. So how do they do that? Well, they do it partly through physical means, by putting out these fear-based ideas. For example, the world is coming to an end next week because a comet is going to hit the Earth. Or UFOs are going to come and kill all humans and steal our resources. Or there's going to be a financial collapse. Or there's a conspiracy that's going to take over the world. So there can be many theories like that that induce fear in people. But beyond that, these could be said to be physical means of inducing fear. But beyond that, there's an emotional means of inducing fear where the dark forces can project. I said that the dark force that isn't in a physical body can't hurt you physically. But a dark being in the emotional realm can project energies and thoughts or ideas at you at the emotional level. So what they often seek to do is they seek to stir up our emotional bodies. And I assume many spiritual people are familiar with the idea that we have an energy field or aura around our physical bodies, and part of that aura is the emotional body. People are probably also aware that we have chakras, and they can project energies at our chakras. In computer hacking, you have this concept of a brute force attack, where you are so many requests at a server that it overwhelms the server, and you can have the same brute force energy attack against your solar plexus chakra, for example, that stirs up your solar plexus chakra, and you feel agitated and very frustrated. So this can be done at the emotional level. And then at the mental level, you have that they can direct thoughts into your mental body. And this can be like more sophisticated theories about fear, something bad happening. Many conspiracy theories, for example, are designed to do this, to go in and they give you this fear that there is this secret conspiracy that's plotting to take over the world and destroy society. And because they're secret, what can you do about it? So the conspiracy theory tells you there is this secret cabal of people. They don't tell you who they are. So in a sense, you are both empowered and disempowered at the same time. You are empowered by the sense you know something other people don't know. And you can see some of these people who are into conspiracy theories, they feel, in a sense, they feel prideful because they have realized there's this terrible conspiracy. On the other hand, they don't really know who these people are. I mean, even if you say that there's this secret group of people. What are you going to do about it? So you are pacified at the same time. You supposedly know something, but you don't really know enough to do something about it, and that induces fear. Then you can have, even at the identity level, where they are projecting thoughts into your identity body that make you afraid to do anything out of the ordinary, to stand out from the crowd. You can see the whole, basically Jesus' life is an example of what happens to a person who attains such oneness with the one mind that he has manifested what we can call personal Christhood. So he stands out, he challenges the authorities, and what do? They attack him and kill him. And they can project this: don't do what Jesus did, you're going to be killed like he was. And of course that isn't as likely to happen in today's world as it was 2,000 years ago. So anyway, so they project these ideas. So this is fear. But there is another way that they attack people that's much more subtle, and that's through pride. And, you know, I have explained in my ego discourses that the ego has this desire to be special. And many people have that desire. Not everybody, because some people, the ego, they always have duality with the ego. So some egos want to be special, other people want to be invisible and want to blend into the crowd and not stand out. But there are people who want to be special, and the dark forces are very skillful at using this, both at the emotional, mental, and identity level, to make people feel that because they are doing whatever they are doing or believing whatever they are doing, they're really special. And many times this causes people to give their energies to the dark forces without realizing it. You can actually meet, and I have met them in my time on the spiritual path, you can meet spiritual people who have this desire to be special, and therefore they open their minds to ideas that are just very unbalanced. You might say too far out. But they feel that because they are among the few people who can accept these ideas, they are so sophisticated and so special. And it's often the dark forces in the mental realm or even the lower identity realm that are feeding these ideas into people's minds, making them feel very special. There are some channelers that fall into this category. They are channeling these beings in the mental and identity realm, and they give this very sophisticated teaching that, quite frankly, is very difficult to understand. And because it's difficult to understand, there's a lot of room for interpretation, so people can feel they have a very sophisticated understanding, therefore they're special. But it also gives the energy to these forces. So, you know, you have to realize when you talk about dark forces that, you know, as I've explained in my talks about non-duality, I have a couple of talks where I focused about the duality consciousness. And there are always the two polarities. So you can never really be safe in duality. Anything can be used. And it's the same thing with dark forces. So you have the concept, that's the word, dark forces, right? And when you say dark forces, most people will think of the traditional images of the devil. Here's this grim-looking person, probably red and with red eyes and with horns and hoofed feet, and he's obviously evil. So that's what many people think is a dark force. But really, as I said, that if you're talking about dark forces, it's because they don't have light from the spiritual realm. They can't receive light from the spiritual realm. But this doesn't mean they appear like the devil or they appear evil. They are beings who can be said to be dark beings who can appear benign. They can even appear to be spiritual or sophisticated or very knowledgeable. And this ties in with what I explained in my talk about how the world was created, that there are these fallen beings who fell a very, very long time ago in a previous sphere, as I explained. So they've had a very, very long time to use the dualistic mind, the linear mind, the logical, analytical mind, and they are much more skilled at this than those of us who originated in this sphere. And that's why they can appear to be benign. And because they are good at stealing energy from other people, they can even appear to have energy, even spiritual light. Because they take other people's energy and they radiate it, and they can actually use it to project at other people. You can even find some physical gurus where, I don't want to mention names here because people always get totally upset if I say their guru is a false guru. But there are gurus where if you look at their actions and how they either abused other people or caused these people to do the most bizarre things, you have to say there was something wrong there. But yet you can find people who say, oh, but I was with the guru and he touched my third eye and I felt this surge of spiritual light. And I fell over and I was shaking and it must be genuine. But it can really actually happen that this person has taken the light he has stolen from other people, or even light he's received from forces in the mental or identity realm. He's using that light to direct at a certain person. And it overwhelms the person. He thinks this must be a spiritual person, or this is a spiritual experience. And therefore, he gives his loyalty to the guru. So he received an initial influx of light that the guru had stolen from other people. And now he gives his energy to the guru, who can then use it to impress other people. And there are people who will, I look at some of these gurus out there, and I just look at them and I can see they are false guru or they are fallen beings. But there are people who will swear, oh, this is the highest guru ever, even though he behaved in a way that was the most bizarre, ridiculous way you could possibly imagine for a spiritual guru. I mean, how can a spiritual guru behave like this, you say to yourself. But there are people who swear that this is because they were attacked by dark forces through that guru, and they can't tell the difference. So, these are just some of the ways that they attack us. And the problem with talking about this topic is that it can quickly become overwhelming for people because they feel, what defense do I have? If even what appears to be a benign guru can be a fault, what defense do I have? But you do have the defense, and the defense is simply this. Everything is created out of the one mind, meaning you have the one mind within you. You have access to the one mind within you. And this means that you can use the one mind to build gradually this discernment where you can tell, is this person coming from the one mind? Has this person attained oneness with the one mind? Or is this person just coming from the separate mind but cleverly disguising it? And you can learn to read that, even at a vibrational level. The other thing I would say is that when you're talking about dark forces, it is really, really helpful, I would even say necessary, that you know about ascended masters. And that's what I again explained in my video about how the world was created. You have the dark forces, but you also have the ascended masters, who are our way to avoid being fooled or attacked by the dark forces. So when you start thinking about these topics, it's important to know about Archangel Michael, that you can invoke his light for spiritual protection. It's important to know about other masters that you are personally close to, who can help you build that Christ discernment. Because basically, you can say there's fear, there's pride. But what is fear and what is pride? Why are you afraid of something? Because you have an illusion. Why are you prideful about something? Because you have an illusion. So how is it that the dark forces attack us? Well, they attack us by making us believe in an illusion, or by just confusing us to the point where we think, well, I can't know by myself what's true, that's why I have to follow the guru. But you can know when you gradually build this recognition that the one mind is in you. So, it's very important to realize that the fallen beings can only attack you through your ignorance or illusion. But there is an antidote to ignorance or illusion, and it is the one mind, the Christ discernment. And the way to build this Christ discernment is to work with your own higher self, your I Am Presence, and the ascended masters that are assigned to help you. All spiritual people have ascended masters that are their personal guides, and when you make contact with them, you can know, because you have a contrast. It's like I've said with the colored glasses. If you were born with colored glasses and never seen the sky without the glasses, you might think the sky really is green. But when you have experienced the sky without the glasses, you know that when you're wearing yellow glasses, the sky hasn't changed color. So if you have grown up not having any direct contact with the ascended masters who are your guides or with your higher self, then you can more easily believe in the dark forces and their lies and their illusions. But when you have experienced your higher self, the one mind, the ascended masters, you have a frame of reference. And now you can evaluate. Because the ascended masters are not seeking to force you or fool you. They have no intent of manipulating you, and they don't have intent of stealing your energy. And once you experience that, it's just something you can compare. Whatever happens and whatever you encounter in the world, you can compare it to that purity of intent, purity of vibration. And it's something that's available to everybody. But it may, for some people, require that they go through a process where you really have to be determined to free yourself from this influence of these dark forces who may have, maybe even in past lifetimes, put these, we might say, hooks in your energy field. For example, in your emotional body, you have a certain fear there. You might have a maelstrom or vortex of fear in your emotional body that makes you vulnerable to these projections of fear. You might have a certain intellectual pride in your mental body that makes you think you're sophisticated and you can understand everything. And you have to work on these. This is why I've talked about these separate selves that we have in the subconscious mind, and you can come to see those and transcend them. So what I'm trying to say is that the dark forces can only attack you through your lack of awareness, your ignorance, your illusion. And so if you are willing to look at your beliefs, look at your approach, your attitude, you can overcome anything that the dark forces can throw at you. Whatever hook they have in you, whatever tie you have to them, you can cut yourself free from it, you can learn to see through the illusion, and they will not be able to attack you anymore. Even at the physical level, it's actually much, much more difficult for them to attack you if you don't have something in your mind that makes you vulnerable. For example, if you see yourself in opposition to other people, it's much easier if you attract people to you who will attack you physically. Whereas if you transcend that level of consciousness, it's highly unlikely that you will be attacked physically. You can't totally know because, free will is free will, and some people are really giving their free will to dark forces. But there is a very high probability that you will avoid this kind of thing. So again, the way to look at it is you can look at yourself and you can see, do I have any fears? Is there anything I'm really afraid of? And I have met many people on the spiritual path who have fear. It can be fear of some kind of calamity. I, for example, all of my life, when I was a child, I had this fear that my mind would be taken over by some dark force. And that's why I avoided drugs or alcohol, because I felt that if I wasn't in control of my awareness or my will, it was more likely that my mind could be taken over. I was also unwilling to be hypnotized. I mean, you couldn't. I remember I was a child and there was a hypnotist who came to our school. And we were all sitting there in the auditorium, and he was hypnotizing certain people, calling them up on the stage, making them cluck like a chicken or think their pants were on fire and that kind of thing. And I just stayed way back. I looked at it from a distance, but I was not going to get hypnotized because I didn't want any force to take over my mind. And I met many spiritual people who have the same thing. I also met spiritual people who haven't quite realized this, and it's often through either they have this extreme fear or they have this extreme pride. So there are some people, spiritual people I met, they are so intent on being special that they literally sell their soul to the devil, so to speak, in order to have some kind of special ability, like a psychic ability or an ability to see auras or whatever it may be, heal people or whatever. And so you can look at yourself. Do you have any kind of this? Do you have any attachment to being special? Do you have any special fears? And then you can start using the tools that I've given about the separate self, because this comes from a separate self or several separate selves. And if you unravel it, you can come to see it and you can just let it go. And the thing is, the moment you overcome that separate self that makes you vulnerable to the dark forces, at that moment, they don't have an inroad into your energy field, into your mind. And they can continue to attack you, they can continue to project at you, but once you overcome the self, you're not vulnerable to it. I mean, I can see, there have been other questions where people have asked, for example, when you rise on the spiritual path, do you become more of a target for dark forces? And you do, but it doesn't affect you anymore. So I can look back and say there was a time where I had a certain separate self, for example, that made me very, very afraid of being wrong, or very reluctant to be wrong. And I could see that when I could get a projection that, oh, you're wrong, you were wrong, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have said this. And my mind would then engage in it. And I overcame that self some time ago, quite a few years ago, but I still once in a while get this projection. It's just that now I recognize it's a projection. You see, the dynamic here is very simple. If you have a separate self in your mind, for example, that doesn't want to be wrong, when the dark forces are projecting an energy impulse and a thought at you, it stirs up that self. And now your mind is colored by this self, this perception filter, and you are engaging in it, and you think, oh, this is internal. This is, in my mind, I need to not be wrong. So all of a sudden you're pulled into thinking about this, feeling about this, and the spiral just keeps going in your mind. And you can become almost obsessive about this. You think about it. I can look back where I had some difficult situations, I had conflicts with other people, and I would obsess about it. And for days, sometimes even weeks, I could go over it again and again in my mind, feeding my thoughts and energy into it, And today, I don't have the self, which means that when a projection comes to me, I know it's coming from the outside. And as Jesus said, the prince of this world cometh and has nothing in you. So why do I need to engage in it? There's nothing in me that engages in it. It just passes right through. But you still get the projection because the dark forces are the dark forces. They are just like computers, all they can do is project. And they are basically projecting at everybody. It's in a way you could say that, well, you could say, there are, right now where you're sitting, there's radio waves being projected into the room where you're sitting. There are maybe, depending on where you live, 2 stations, 10 stations, 100 radio stations that are projecting these radio waves into your room. And they are going through your energy field, of course. But if you don't have a radio receiver that's tuned to a specific station, those waves are just passing through you, right? So the subconscious self is your radio receiver in your subconscious mind. And the dark forces may be constantly projecting out this, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But it's the subconscious self in you that makes you tune into this projection. And all of a sudden, it seems like it's internal, now you have to do something about it. But when you get rid of the subconscious self, it's like you get rid of the radio, and nothing is picking up. The projections are still there, and you might actually sometimes be conscious of them, but there's nothing in you that starts any spiral where you're trying to do something about it. You can just look at it and say, okay, just forget it, just projection. And So that is the potential we all have, and part of the spiritual path is really doing this. I mean, I have talked several times about the spiritual path having stages. And I've talked about how the spiritual path really starts when we reach that 48th level of consciousness where we are willing to look at ourselves in order to change. And then there's a period where we walk from the 48th to the 96th level of consciousness. And I've described it before that this is where you pull yourself above the collective consciousness. But you are also pulling yourself above the reach of these dark forces. So it's like you get rid of oneself here, oneself there, and there is less and less of the dark forces can pull on or push on by stirring things up in your consciousness. So you can say that the first part of the spiritual path is really to make yourself invulnerable to any external force that's able to influence your mind. And this can be the collective consciousness, it can be other people, and it can be these dark forces. So you really come to that point that Jesus said, where the prince of this world cometh and has nothing in me. He's got no subconscious self that he can stir up, so you are now thinking there is an internal process that's affecting you. You realize this is just coming from the outside, it's got nothing to do with you. You don't need to react to it. You don't need to do anything about it. And so I hope this is helpful. It is really a process. It can't be done by just switching your mind. It can be done by coming to see a self and then switching out of that self, seeing it's unreal. But for all of us, there's more than one self we need to overcome to be completely free of the influence of dark forces, because we are on an unnatural planet. There are many dark forces that are constantly trying to prevent us from growing spiritually. So you have to look at this in the long term. It's a long-term process. It doesn't have to take lifetimes, it doesn't have to take a whole lifetime, but it will take time for most of us to come to that. For me, it took 20, 25 years at least, and then there was still some cells that made me vulnerable, not so much to a direct attack, but more to reacting to certain things. And you could say there are still certain selves that we are working on until we reach the 144th level of consciousness. But it's not necessarily the dark forces. There comes that point where when you go beyond the 96th level, you're really not directly vulnerable to the dark forces anymore. So I hope this is somewhat helpful. I know it's, for some people it'll be discouraging. Oh, it's so difficult. Give me the Reader's Digest version. Give me the way to flip a switch and I'm free of these dark forces instantly. And there just is no switch. I know there's some spiritual gurus that will tell you that there is, but it's just not the case.